Alright, part 178.50. Specification 4B welded brazed steel cylinders. Type size, surface pressure. 4B welded brazed steel cylinder with longitudinal seams that are 4 lap welded brazed with the capacity water capacity of not over 1,000 pounds, surface pressure at 150 but not over 500 psi. Cylinders closed with the spinning process are not authorized. Steel, open hearth, electrical, basic oxygen process, steel uniform quality may be used. Content percent may not exceed 25 hundredths per carbon, 45 thousandths, phosphor, 50 thousandths, sulfur. Identification material must be identified in suitable method except for the plate and billets. Hot drawn cylinders must be marked without heat number. Manufactured cylinders must be manufactured using equipment and process adequate to ensure that each of the cylinder produces conform with the requirements of this part. Subpart, no defect permitted, is likely to weaken the finished cylinder appreciable with a reasonable smooth uniform surface if it is required. Exposed bottom of the wells on cylinder over 18 inches long must be protected by foot rings. Welding procedures operators must be qualified in accordance with CGA pamphlet C3. Seams must be made as follows: welded or brazed differential seams. Heads attached by brazing must be driven and fit with a shell, unless the shell is crimped and swedged or curled under over a skirt and flange with a head with thoroughly blazed until complete penetration of brazing material is over the brazed joint and secured with the depth of the brazing with the front end of the shell must be at least 4 times the thickness of the shell metal. Longitudinal seams and shells. Longitudinal seams must be 4 lap welded and copper brazing, copper alloy brazing, silver alloy. Copper alloy composition must be copper of 95% minimum, silicon 1.5%, and 3.85%. Magnesium, a quarter of a percent, and 1.10% melting point of silver alloy. Brazing material must be in excess of 1,000 when brazed. Plate edge must be lapped 8 times the thickness of the blade laps to help with the position substantially metal to metal riveting. Electrical spot welding braze must be done using suitable flux by placing brazing material on one side of the seam and then applying with the heat only with the material shoved with uniformly along with the seam of the other side. Welding and brazing only of the attachment, net rings, foot rings, handles, bosses, pads, valve protection ring with the top and bottom cylinders. Welding, brazing, and so authorized such attachments for portion container to which the latter attached may be weldable steel with carbon content which may not exceed a quarter of a percent, except in the case of the Ford 3130X. Steel may be used with a proper welding procedure. Weld thickness for the cylinder must comply with the following requirements for cylinders outside the diameter 6 inches and when a wall thickness of 900ths of an inch, and any of the case for the minimum wall thickness must be such for the calculated wall stress. Minimum test pressure may not exceed the following values: 24,000 psi cylinder, longitudinal seam 22,800 psi gauge cylinder having copper braze cylinder, alloy braze longitudinal seam 18,000 psi cylinder having 4 lap welded longitudinal. 2 calculations must be made. Formula: heat treatment cylinder bodies heads formed or the drawing pressure it must be uniformly properly heated and treated prior to testing. Opening in cylinders must conform with the following: each opening within cylinders except for the safety devices must be provided with a fitting hose or pad securely attached to cylinder brazing or welding by threads, and fitting must be made. Pad must be steel suitable for method attachment employed with which need not to be identified, verified, analyzed with except for the attachment by welding carbon content not exceeding a quarter percent of the threads or either of them to comply with the following: threads must be clean cut even without check the tape for the gauge. Threads must be to the length of not specified with American Standard pipe threads. Straight threads having at least 4 engaged threads that have the type of the calculated shear strength with at least 10 times the test pressure for the cylinder gasket required adequate prevention and leakage. 4 brass fittings may be brazed and sealed off the flange of the cylinders due to the component parts of the hand and firing. Extinguisher closure fitting off the pads must be adequate to prevent leakage. Hydrostatic test cylinders must be withdrawn with hydrostatic test as valve test must be water jacket. The other suitable method operated to be obtained with accurate data of the present gauge must be permit reading to an accuracy of 1% of the expansion of the gauge must be permit reading to the total expansion of the accuracy within 1% of the tenth of the cubic centimeter. Pressure must be maintained at least 30 seconds sufficiently to ensure complete expansion of any internal pressure applied with the heat treatment of previously. Official test may not exceed 10% of the test pressure. If the due failure of the test apparatus, test pressure cannot be maintained. The test may be repeated at pressure increased at 10% of the 100 psi gauge, which is lower. Alright, 3. Permanent volumetric expansion may not exceed 10% of the total metric volumetric expansion test procedure. The cylinder may be tested as follows: at least one cylinder selected with a random out of each lot with 20% of the 200 or less must be tested according to outline and paragraph B1, 1, 2, 1, 3 of the section at least 2 times the surface pressure. All cylinders not tested in the outside outline in paragraph 1A141 of the section must be examined under the pressure at least 2 times surface pressure showing no defects. Flattening test. A hydrostatic testing flatness test must be performed with a cylinder test with a random out of each of the least out of each of the lot with a 200 left of the placing cylinder between the wedge-shaped knife with the edge of the 60 degrees incline angle. Around a half-inch radius longitudinal axis of the cylinder must be at 90 degrees angle with the knife during the test for lots of 30 or less flattened tests that are authorized to be made of the ring at least 8 inches long, cut from each cylinder front subject the heat and treatment as furnished in cylinder. Physical tests must be conducted to determine the tensile strength, elongation, reductions are materials follows. Test is required with the two specimens cut from one cylinder part with the three thereof. The heat treated is required with the random out of each lot with the 200 left lot for lots than 3 or 30 less physical tests authorized to be made of the ring one ring at least 8 inches long cut with each cylinder. Subject same heating treatment as finished cylinder. Specimen must conform with the following. A gauge length with 8 inches went over not over 1.5 inch of the gauge with the length of the 2 inches with the width of not 1/2 inch with the 1.5 inch gauge length with a 24 inch with the thickness of the width not over 6 inches, 6 times the thickness of the authorized cylinder wall with not over 3/16 of an inch. Specimen inclusive of the grip of the end, and ends may not be fitted with the grip ends may not be flat with 1 inch for the end of the reduced section. When size of the cylinder does not permit the straightening of the specimen may be taken in the location direction and may be straightened without flat and cold pressure, but only with the knot the blows when specimen are so taken and prepared. Inspector report must show the connection record of physical testing, detailed information in regard to specimens. Heating of the specimen for the purpose of the authorized yield strength with attention must be stressed for the corresponding with the permanent strength with a 2/10% gauge length with the following conditions apply. The yield strength with it must be determined either with the offset of the method extension under load method is prescribed. ASME the using of the extension over the load of the method to the corresponding strength with the 2/10% with the strength and curve may be determined with sufficient accuracy to the calculated with the elastic expansion of the gauge length with the under the appropriate load over the added thereto the 2/10% gauge length. The elastic extension of the calculations must be made with elastic modules 30 million in the event of the controversy. The inch higher strain stress there of the diagram must be applied with the yield strength determined with the 2/10%. For the purpose of the strain test, the initial stress and strain must be separated with the specimen is used on the stress of the 1200 psi, 12,000 psi straight indicator reading must be sampling calculated with the corresponding strain crosshead speed of the testing machine not exceeding 1/8 of an inch per minute during the yielding strain. Acceptable the result of the physical flattening test either the following example acceptable results elongation leaf of 40% of the 2-inch gauge length with at least 20% of the other case of the yield strain not over 73% of the total strain. In this instance of the flattening test is not required with the cylinders. Constructed welded pipe flattening tests are required with a cracking of 6 times the wall thickness and such of the case of the rings crop ends of the cut of the end of the pipe must be tested the weld at 30 and 45 degrees less from the point of the greatest stress of the ring of the falls. Another of the same end of the pipe may be tested. Rejected cylinder reheat treatment is authorized. Rejected cylinder subsequent thereto is must pass all prescribed tests except the prepare belt brace seams with the bracing welded seam welding is authorized. Markings must be sand painted with the permanent any with the following location cylinders on shoulder top head that are not less than 80,000 inch thick with the one side of the wall adjacent to the top of the side walls which are not less than 90,000 inch. Cylinder portion of the shell that may extend beyond the recessed bottom of the cylinder constitution integral to non-pressure of the part of the cylinder. One metal plate attached for the top of the cylinder and permanent part therefore of the sufficient part must be left on the plate with the provided stamping after the least 6 and retest date for the plate must be at least 1/16 of an inch thick, must be attached to the weld or bracing rod must weld at a temperature of 1100 degrees. Welding brace must be along the edge of the plate. On the neck with a neck ring valve boss valve protection sleeve with the cylinder part of the permanently attached to the top of the cylinder on foot ring permanently attached to the cylinder and provide with the water capacity for the cylinder is 75%. 178.51 specification 4BA welded brazed steel cylinder type size with the pressure .4BA cylinder is either cylindrical shape with the water capacity of 100,000 pounds left with the pressure of 225 not over 500 psi gauge. Closure made of spinning process is not authorized. Cylindrical type cylinders must be made free of 2 seamless hemispheres joined with a welding of 1 circumferential seam. Cylindrical type of the cylinder must be circumferential welded or brazed in construction. Seal the steel unit constructed for the cylinder must be specified by the table of 1 appendix A over the part and index over the material identified with any with the stability or suitability of the method of the unit in place of the bill with a hot drawn cylinders must be marked with a heat number. Manufactured cylinder must be even equipment the process adequate to ensure that each of the cylinder must produce the conform the requirements of the subpart. No defect is permitted with the likely to weaken. Finished cylinders are appreciable with a reasonable smooth and uniform surface of the finish is required. The exposed bottom of the welded cylinders over 18 inches long must be protected. Split ring cylinders must be made as follows. Minimum thickness of the head of the bottoms will not be less than 90 of the weld required thickness of the sidewall. Circumferential seams must be made of the welding braze head. The must be tapped with the bracing must be driving fit with the shell, but then left of the shell is crimson sledge curled over the skirt and the flange of the head. It must be thoroughly blazed until the complete penetration of the brazing material of the braze joint and skirt. Depth brazing from the end of the shell must be at least 4 times thickness of the shell metal. Longitudinal seams of shell must be made with copper braid with the copper alloy, brazing silver alloy, brazing copper alloy composition, the copper 95% minimum, silicon 1.5% to 3.8.5%, magnesium a quarter percent of the 1.10% of the metalling component of the silver alloy brazing material must exceed 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The plate edge must be lapped at least 8 times the thickness of the plate with the lap begins the held in position substantially metal to metal rivet with electrical spot welding. Brazing must be done usable, suitable flexing, placing brazing material one on the side of the seam, applying heat until the material show uniformly along the seam and other side with the strength of the longitudinal seam of the copper braids. Longitudinal seams must have the strength at least 3.5 times the strength of the wall of the welding procedure. Operative must be qualified in accordance with the TGA pamphlet C3. Welding brazing only. Welding brazing net ring, foot rings, handle, Boss's pads, weld protection rings at the top of the bottom of the cylinders authorized provided with such attachment portion of the container to which they are attached made with weldable steel covering content which may not exceed 0.25% except for the case of the 4130 with the seal which may be the proper welding procedure. Wall thickness. Minimum wall thickness of the cylinder must meet the following conditions for any of the cylinder with outside of the diameter greater than 6 inches with the minimum wall thickness of 78 thousandths of an inch. In case the minimum wall thickness must be set to the calculated will strip. The minimum test pressure may be not exceed the lesser value of any of the following. The valve shown on table 1 with the appendix A with the most proper particular material under the consideration 1/2 of the minimum testing strength of the material determined required in part paragraph J of the section 35,000 psi. Further provided wall stress cylinder with a head and copper braze and longitudinal seams may not exceed 95% of the above the value of the measured wall thickness may not include the galvanizing other protective coating. 2 cylinders of cylindrical shape that must have the wall strip calculated in the formula. Cylinders of elliptical shape must have the wall strip calculated by this formula. For cylinders with the wall thickness less than 100,000 of an inch, the ratio line and tangential length of the outside diameter does not exceed 4.1. Heat treatment cylinders must be heat treated in accordance with the following requirements. Each of the cylinder must be uniformly properly heat treated prior to the test for the applicable method shown in table 1. Appendix A, this part of the treatment must be accomplished after all forming the welding operation except for the braze joints are used in heat treatment must follow any of the forming the welding operations by assume it may be done during after brazing operation. Heat treatment is not required after the welding or brazing weldable low carbon attachment for the similar material they have previously welded the braze and top of the bottom of the cylinder and properly heat with the tree with the provided each of the subsequent welding brazing does not produce temperature in excess of the 400 degrees Fahrenheit part of the top of the material. Openings in the cylinder openings of the cylinders must comply with the following requirements. An opening must be placed with other than cylindrical surface. Each of the elliptical type of the cylinders must be provided with the fitting of the bottom of the pad weldable steel securely attached to the container with fusion welding. Each opening of cylinder type of the cylinder is provided for the fitting of the bottom of the pad is securely attached with the container by brazing or welding by welding. If threads are used they must comply with the following. The threads must clean out even without the check with the tape gauges. Tapered threads must be length but not less than specified with American standard taper pipe threads. Straight threads have at least 4 engaged threads may have tight fit with a calculated shear strength with at least 10 times the test pressure of the cylinder gasket adequate to prevent leakage. And this required hydrostatic test. Each cylinder must successfully withstand a hydrostatic test as follows. This must be water jacket. Other suitable method of operating is obtained with the accurate depth of the pressure gauge. These must be permit reading of the accurate with 1% of the expansion gauge. That must be permit reading of the total expansion accuracy with 1%, 1/10 of the cubic centimeter. Pressure must be maintained at least 30 seconds sufficiently longer to ensure complete expansion for the internal pressure applied with the heat treatment. Previously of the official test may not exceed 90% of the test pressure. Permanent volumetric expansion may not exceed 10% of the total volumetric expansion. Test pressure of the cylinder must be tested as follows. At least one cylinder selected with a random out of each of the 200 or must be tested as outlined paragraph 1, 2, 1, 3 of the section less at least for the time 2 times the 3. 2 times the surface pressure. All cylinders not tested outside of the paragraph 141 section must be examined under the pressure at least 2 times surface pressure shown no defect. Physical tests must be conducted to determine the yield of the strength of the tensile strength, elongation, reduction, area of the material. The follow the test is required with a 2% 2 specimen cutout, 1 cylinder therefore over the pass for the hydrostatic heat treated, but the required with the taken random out of each of the 200 or less. Physical test sphere for the required with the 2 specimen cup from the representative sample plate for the same heat taken the random seal used and produced the sphere. The flat seal from the 2 specimens are to be cut with the most respect the same heat with the treatment sphere with themselves with the same flavor that must be taken within each of the lot with the 200 or less spheres. Specimens conform with the following gas length with the 8-inch width not over 1.5 inches for the gauge with the length with 2 inches for the width, but not over 1.5 inches. The gauge length with 24 inches of thickness with the width of over 6 inches, 6 times the thickness of the authorized of the cylinder walls, not over 3/16 of an inch. The specimen exclusively with the gripped end, but it may not be flattened with the gripped end, but may be flattened within 1 inch of the end of the reduction side. But the side of the cylinder does not permit the shape of the specimen. The specimen must be taken with any location direction, may be straightened, flattened, cold, with eye pressure, not with eye the blow of the specimen. Specimens are taken and prepared. With the inspector report shall be with the connection record physical theft detailed information regarding to the such specimen, the heat of the specimen of any of the purpose of the authorized yield strength of tension must be stress corresponding with the permanent strength of the 2/10 of the strength of the gauge of length with the following condition. The yield strength must be determined by either offset of the method of extension out of the load method is prescribed by ASTM EA and using extension out of the load method of the total strength corresponding to the strength of the 2/10 of the permanent strain occurred with the determining by the session or accuracy of calculating elastic extension of the gauge length with the appropriate load with the adding 2/10 of the percent gauge elastic extension calculation must be based on elastic module 30 million. In the event of controversy, entry stress strain with the diagram must be plotted with the yield the strength determined of the 2/10 of the percent offset. For the purpose of the strain measure, the initial strain reference must be set with a specimen of the strength of the 12 per 100 psi with the strain indicator reading must be set with the calculated corresponding strain. Cross-headed speed with the testing machine that exceeds 1/8 of an inch per percent during the yielded strength determination. Elongation physical testing must show with at least 40% of the elongation 2-inch gauge length with at least 20% of the other case except for the elongation percentage may be reduced numerically to 2 by 2 inches specimen or by other cases with 7,500 psi increment testing strength 50 psi to maximum force search increments. Test welds. Except as brave with the seam of the weld that must be tested as follows. Tensile test. Specimen must be cut from one cylinder of each of the lot with 2 or less welded test plate. With the welded test plate must be one of the eye heats of a lot of 2 or less of the representative the same condition, approximately same thickness cylinder wall, except in no case it must be the lesser thickness required with the quarter side of the Sharpie impact. Specimen the weld must be made with the same procedure with the subject with the same heat treatment of the major weld on the cylinder specimen must be taken across the weld major seam must be prepared and tested in corners, but there must be requirements. CGA pamphlet C3 should be specimen file. Meet the requirements. Specimen may be taken additional cylinders welding test plate from the same lot tested in either later. Specimen failed to meet the requirements of the entire lot represented to be rejected. Guided bent test. For the guided bent test specimen may be covered with the cylinder welded test plate with you. Then the test cylinder specified 1-1 specification must be taken across the major seam must be prepared test according with must meet the requirements of CGA pamphlet C3. Alternate guide bend test. They may be either must be required with the CGA pamphlet C3 specification must be bent with the elongation outer surface of the accident adjacent with the root of the weld between the lightly described gauge line with it must be at least 20% of the except for the percent that may be reduced. Steel having a tensile strength with a 50,000 psi gauge providing K of the section. Rejected cylinders reheat treatment authorized rejected cylinders subsequent thereto the cylinders must also be prescribed to the acceptable repair bracing welding seams and welding authorized markings must be stamped painfully and permanently in one some following location. Cylinder one shoulder top of the head of the 87 thousandths of an inch one side wall adjacent to the top head of the four side with a not less than 9,000 inch of the thick cylinder portion of which extend the end of the reach at the bottom of the cylinder consisting to the integral pressure part of the cylinder one plate attached to the top of the cylinder permanent with a over the surface space may be left on the plate to provide the stamping relief. There was 6 retest day, but the plate must be at least 1/16 of an inch must be attached to welding brace if the temperature released to 1100 degrees Fahrenheit at the top of the edge of all the plate. On the neck and neck ring valve protection sleeve with a similar part with the permanently attached to the top of the cylinder. On foot ring permanently attached to the cylinder provided. Water capacity of the cylinder does not exceed 25 pounds. Art 17853, specification 4D, welded steel cylinder of the aircraft. Type of stuff is over the pressure without 4D cylinders, welded steel with a cylindrical. The sphere of 2 seams atmosphere with a cylinder comfortable welded sphere of 2 semi-less drawn shell with a water capacity of not over 100 pounds surface pressure, at least 300, not over 1500 psi cylinder, clove over the spinks unprocessed and authorized. Steel open heard electrical steel uniform weld compatibility by used and constant next to the following carbon 0.25% of the phosphorus of 45,000 sulfur 50,000 accepted as though following steel commercially known as 4130X and 304, 316, 321, 347 the same in the steel may be used in proper welding. Proceed with the heat of the steel may be the table 1 with a check with the chemical analysis which in slightly specified range acceptable satisfactory and all of the respective provided the tolerance are shown in table 2, paragraph B are not exceeded, but except for the approved with the Associated Administrator of the following chemical analysis authorized. Alright, identification of materials. Material must be identified with any suitable method except for the plate for the pilots for the hole drawn cylinder. There must be marked with the heat number to manufacture. Cylinders must be manufactured with equipment properly adequate to ensure that each of the cylinder produced the conform with the requirements of the subpart with no defect with the permanent likely to weaken the finished container separately with a reasonable, smooth, uniform surface finish required with the welding procedure. The operator may be called within accordance with the CGA C3. Wall thickness of the wall strip. The minimum test pressure must exceed 224,000 PSI with except for the stainless steel not exceeding 41 by 30 axis type of the 304, 316, 314, 321, 347 stainless steel. Or use stress and test pressure may not exceed 37 PSI. Minimum wall thickness of any of the container with a capacity of 1100 cubic inches with the 400 of the cubic inch minimum wall thickness of any of the container capacity with 1100 cubic inches of the 95,000 inch. Calculation must be done with the following. Calculation is made of the following, made by the formula. Calculation for the cylinder must be made from the formula. Alright, heat treatment. The completed cycle cylinder of the must be uniformly properly heated treated prior to the opening of the containers. Opening cylinders must comply with the following. Each opening of the container, except for the safety device, must provide with the fitting post pad with a securely attached to the container with heavy welding or by threads. Threads used must comply with the following. Threads must be cleaned out even without the check of the tape. The tape threads must be made at length with not less than specified American standard tapered pipe threads. The straight threads having at least 4 engaged threads must have the tight and calculated shear strength with at least 10 times the test spread for the container gas adequate to prevent leakage is required. Closure fitting above the pad must be adequate to prevent leakage. Hydrostatic pressure tester must be successfully withstand with the hydrostatic pressure as follows. Test must be made with the water jet with the other suitable method of pressure operated with the obtainment of the accurate data of the pressure gauge. Must remember the reading of the accuracy of the 1% expansion for the gauge. Must permit reading of the total expansion and accuracy of 1% of the cubic centimeter pressure must be maintained at least 30 seconds sufficiently long to ensure the complete with the expansion internal pressure for the ply, but after the heat to remain previously with the initial testing must be made at 9% of the test pressure. If due to the failure of the testing apparatus, the test pressure cannot be made, the test must be repeated. The pressure increase to 10% to 100 psi gauge, whatever is lower. Permit volumetric expansion may not exceed 10% of the total volumetric expansion. Test pressure for the container that must be attached to the valve of each container that has at least 2 surface pressure for the one container out of each for the top. Each lot of 200 release of the 3 times the pressure for the other must be examined under pressure for the 2 times surface pressure for the with no defects. Flattening tests and fears and cylinders. Fears and cylinders must be subject to the flattening test of solve with one fear of the random out of each release. Each lot of 200 less of the subject for the flattening test is 12 of the test must be performed. The hydrostatic test must be written parallel steam plate with the pressure well with the steam angles to the plate with any projection improvements may be cut off of the mechanical means with only the crushing. Only cylinder random out of each of the 200 left over the subject with the flattening test is followed. The test must be performed. The hydrostatic test must be between the knife edge wedge shape the 60 angle of the round with a half-inch radius or at least 60 or less. Physical tests authorized may have the ring at least 8 inches from the cup of each cylinder subject to the same heat with the treatment finish the cylinder. Physical test and specimen of the fears and cylinders must be set with the physical test as followed. Physical test and fear required with the 2 specimen cut with the representative of the sample plate. Same heat and to a random steel you produce sphere flat. This flat steel is from the 2 specimens of must receive the heat treatment sphere for the samples of the sample plate must be taken each of the lot 200 or less sphere special. Specimen spheres may have the gauge length of 2 inch of width of the not over a half inch of the gauge length with a 24 times the thickness of the width of the not over 6 inches. 6 times the thickness is authorized when the wall is not over 3/16 of an inch. Physical test of the cylinder required with the 2 specimen out of the cylinder taken the random out of each release. Each lot 200 or less from the last with 30 or less. Physical test authorized to be made with a ring with at least 8 inches of the long of the and cut from each of the cylinders subject with the same heat treatment finish cylinder shape specimen. The cylinders must conform with the following gauge length with 8 inches of the width not over 1/2 inch of the gauge length with a 2 inch width with not over 1/2 inch gauge length of at least 24 inches of the thickness of the width not over 6 times the thickness of the authorized with the cylinder walls not over 3/16 of an inch thick. Alright, I forgot where I'm at, so let's just start at 178.55. Specification 4B24EE weld braided cylinders. Type spinning process size surface pressure dot 4B240 ET cylinder braze type cylinder made with electronic resistant welding tube. Maximum water capacity cylinder 12 pound 333 cubic inches. The surface with a 240 psi gauge. Maximum outside diameter shell. They have the 5-inch maximum length of the shell with a 21 inches cylinder club with a spring process authorized. So open heart basic oxygen electrical steel uniform quality must be used and plain steel content next to the following carbon 1/4% phosphorus 40,000 5,000 sulfur 50,000 addition with other elements alloy and effect is prohibited. Alright, identification of the material. Material must be identified. Any suitable method of manufacture. Cylinders must be manufactured using the equipment of the process adequate to ensure that each of the cylinder must conform with the quantity of the subpart. No defect with the permitted likely to weaken. For the cylinders appreciable with a reasonable smooth with the uniform surface with the finish as required. Heads may be attached to the shell with the lap bracing may be formed integrally. Thickness of the bottom cylinder of the welded in form of the spinning of the zone with no condition not be less than 2 minimum wall thickness of the cylindrical shell. Such bottom thicknesses must be measured for the area around area bound by lining represented the point of the contact between the cylinder and the floor of the cylinder. Vertical position seam must conform with the following. Circumferential seams must be braids only. Heads must be attached to shell with the lapping braid. Method must overlap less than 4 times with the wall thickness. Bracing material must have the welding point not over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Heads must be driven within the shell zone. Left of the shell with crimped, screwed, or curled over the skirt or flange of the head by thoroughly braided until the complete with the penetration of the joint and bracing material secured and bracing joints made repaired by brazing. What's up, Mama?
Alright, I went out and got you some tobacco and cigarettes.
Alright, I already rolled up some cigarettes.
They're early. I know it's an early Christmas gift for you, but I
Alright. Thank you, Mama. You might be a whole. I'll be alright on that. Thank you. Just leave them there. I'll get them. Longitudinal seam shell must be electrical resistant. While the joints only with no repairs, longitudinal joints permitted. Welding procedure operator must be qualified in accordance with the GGC3 welding brace only with the attachment welding braid at the top of the bottom of the cylinder with the neck ring for the foot rings, handles, buffers, valve protection rings are authorized provided with such for the attachment portion of the container which for the attachment made with the welded steel. The carbon content which for the neck exceeds 1/4% of the weld thickness of the weld stress must be at least 2 times the surface pressure of the neck exceeding the 1,800 psi minimum wall thickness of 44,000. Calculation must be made. The heat treatment here. Heat is formed by drawing the passing with a uniformly properly heated treatment prior to the test of the cylinder integral form. The head's base and the must be subject to normal operation. Normalizing brazing operation may be compliant, provided the operation carried out with the temperature in excess of the upper critical temperature for the seal. Opening in cylinders. Opening in the cylinders must comply with the following. Each for the opening cylinders, except for the safety devices, must provide the fitting Boston pad with the securely attached with the cylinders. Brazing and welding only by threads. Fitting of the bottom of the pads must be steel. Suitable for the methods of attachment employed with which non-independent identify the verified analyze the attachment of the by welding carbon content and exceeding 1/4%. If the threads are either comply with the following, the tape threads must be clean and cut even without check the tape gave. The tape threads are made to be the length of not less than specified American standard tape. Threads straight threads and having at least the 4 engaged thread to have the fit with the calculated string tank with at least 10 times the test pressure for the cylinder's gasket required adequate to prevent leakage. Closure fitting Boston pad with may be adequate to prevent leakage. Hydrostatic each cylinder must successfully withstand hydrostatic tests as follows. The test must be a water jacket. Other suitable method operated to obtain the accurate data. The pressure gauge must be permit the reading and accuracy of 1% of the expansion. Gauge must permit the reading of the total expansion accuracy of 1% with 1/10 of the cubic centimeter. Pressure may be maintained with at least 30 seconds of the sufficiently longer to ensure the complete expansion. Internal pressure applied with the heat treatment made with the previous official test may not exceed 90% of the test pressure. If due to the failure testing rapid with the test pressure may be maintained with the test may repeat with the pressure increase with the 10% at 100 psi gauge, whichever is lower. Permanent volumetric expansion may not exceed 10% of the total volumetric expansion for the test pressure. Cylinders must be tested to follow at least one cylinder selected with a random each of a lot of 200 or less must be used to outline paragraph 1.2.1.3 sections at least 2 times the pressure for the all cylinders not tested and the outline. Paragraph 141 of the section of the examined under the pressure at least 2 times the surface of the pressure have no defect. Each of the 1,000 cylinders low successfully produced each one day must be condensed to a lot. One cylinder must be selected from each of the lot. The hydrostatically tested destruction. If the cylinder bursts from the level of the 5 times surface pressure, the 2 additional cylinders must be selected. The subject with disaster if either by cylinder fails by bursting below 5 times the surface pressure, but the entire lot must be rejected. All cylinders in constituting a lot more identical size ground construction. The heat treatment of the quality. Flattening testing followed with a hydrostatic one cylinder taken with a random each of a lap 2 or less might be subject to flattening test between the knife edge with between 60 angle and rounded a half inch radius. Alright, physical test. Physical test must be conducted to determine the yield, the strength, of the tensile strength, elongation, reduction, area with the material as follows. The test is required with a 2 specimen with a cup of 1 shown with a probe of the 3. Thereof heat treatment is required by taking the random out of each of the 200 or left the case some with the capacity greater than 86 cubic inch out of each of the last 500 left of the cylinder have the capacity with 86 inches cubic inches. The specimen must conform to the following gauge length with 8 inches with a width of not over 1/2 inch for the gauge with a length of 2 inches with a width of not over 1/2 inch for the gauge length with a 24 times the thickness for the width of not over the 6 over times 6 of the thickness of the authorized cylinder wall is not over 3/16 of an inch thick. Specimens exclusive of the grip ends may not be flattened with the grip ends may be flattened with which of the 1 inch of the end of the reduction section. When the side of the cylinder does not permit the skewing the shape of the specimen may be taken with any of the location and direction may be strength with the flat end with the cold with the pressure only, not for the below specimen articulated and prepared with the inspector reports must show the connection with the record physical test, detailed information on the regarding specimen, heating of the specimen of any purpose not authorized, yield strength and tension must be stressed corresponding to the permanent strain of 0.2% gauge length with the following. Additionally, yield strength with must determine the yield by either offset method, extension under load method is prescribed ASME E8. Use the extension under the load method, the tensile strength of the extension under load with the corresponding strength of 0.2% with the strain curve to determine with a sufficient accuracy with the calculate with the elastic extension gauge length under appropriate load and there of 0.2% gauge length. Elastic extension for the calculation must be based elastic module of 30 million. In the event of controversy of the entire stress strain diagram must be plotted. Yield strength determined with the 0.2% offset with the purpose of the strain measurement. With the initial strain must be spoiled while the spaceman under a stress of the 1200 psi of the strain. The indicator reading may be calculated corresponding cross-side space testing with a machine not exceeding with 1/8 of an inch of the percent permanent during the yield strength determination. Acceptable result of the physical flattening test. Couple the result of the physical flattening test. Everything elongation at least 40% of the 2 inch gave the length of the 20% of the of the other case yielding strength with over 70%, 73% of the tank of the incident of flat testing of the required flat without cracking 6 times of the wall thickness with the welded 90 degree of the direction applied with the load with 2 rings of the end of the length with the pipe with the U of the projection lot by with the U of the flattening test. Provided with the rings accompanying with the lot with air representing all thermal processing operation. At least one of the rings must be flattening test. The leak test for all spun cylinders, plug cylinders must be tested. Leakage by gas, air pressure of the bottom of the has been cleaned and free with all the moisture subject to the following conditions. Pressure approximately the same with the no lift. The surface pressure must be applied one side of the finishing bottom of the over the air with the least side 1/16 of the total air over the bottom, not less than 3/4 of an inch for the diameter. Include with the closure for at least 1 minute during which time the other side of the bottom exposed with the pressure must be covered with water. Closely examine the indication of leakage except the prime paragraph at the end of the section cylinders which are leaking must be rejected. Spun cylinders in which one of the end of the closure physical cylinders being while the spinning process plug cylinder in which one of the permanent closure of the bottom of the fin cylinder have been infected by a plug. As safety precaution for the manufacturer effect was made with the tap of the before hydrostatic heat should be designed with aperture over the pressure of the applied with a small shape of the pressure will remove the point of the closure with the air with a small of the possible volume and air. Rejected cylinder the prepare the rejected cylinder. The authorized cylinders that are leaking must be rejected except that the spun cylinder rejected under the provisions of the paragraph M of the section may be removed from the spun cylinders category drilling to remove effective material tapping and plug. Braze joints must be raised. Subsequent operation of the paragraph N1 and N2 of the section acceptable cylinders pass all of the prescribed test. Markings of each of the cylinder must be stamped in the plane with the permanently shouldered top of the head of the valve protection collar with a permanently attached to the cylinder forming the integral part of the air. Provided the cylinders are not less than 90,000 inches, they may be stamped on the side wall adjacent top head. 178.56. Specifications for a 4AA 480 480 welded steel cylinder.